Brazil is a series of contradictions. It is the world's second largest emerging economy. Unemployment is low. A decade of heady growth and progressive social policies reduced glaring discrepancies between rich and poor, to the point where now half the population is middle class. But the hundreds of thousands of people living in poverty in Rio de Janeiro's shanty towns, or favelas, have been left behind. Concrete and corrugated metal shacks perch one atop another on the hillsides above Rio. They are the locus of much of the violence. Gang on gang, militia on gang, and gang on militia violence confirm cultural notions of hypermasculinity. Brazilian culture is rife with violence, and it comes from all sides, from the petty criminals, to the drug cartels, to the government. Brazil claims the globe's seventh highest homicide rate. Violence and murder have remained stubbornly high, even though the police started to wrest control of many of the favelas from the drug lords. That in advance of Brazil hosting the 2014 World Cup and Rio hosting the 2016 Summer Olympics. In the so-called pacification movement, poorly trained, low-paid military police use tanks, helicopter gunships, and assault weapons to annihilate drug dealers and to occupy the favelas. Police are responsible for 15% of all homicides, sometimes summary executions, in Rio. Little boys raised in favelas get the message. Success means becoming a drug dealer, and survival requires carrying a weapon. The bigger, the better. Little girls have one way out of intense poverty: become a gangster's girlfriend. In this seemingly impossible environment, some are working to counter cultural trends. A revolutionary idea is taking hold, slowly of course, and against a tsunami of media and other cultural influences that worship violence. But there is another way. Some say the final phase of feminism is bringing men into the gender parity process, and only then can women become fully equal, letting them see all the work that women do in the home, and letting them experience the joys and the burdens of full-fledged parenting. This is the goal of Promundo, a nonprofit launched in Rio to work with local leaders to transform favela culture. In its Men Care campaign, it teaches men that being a real man doesn't include beating up women and children, but is all about being a strong father and equal caregiver with his intimate partner. And to question the underlying root causes and inequality, both those related to gender and to poverty, that drive the violence. To call attention to the 50,000 murders a year in Brazil, most of those young, male, and of African descent. Some have called it Brazil's genocide. So how do they get from here to there, from crime and violence as a daily reality to love, nonviolence, family, and egalitarianism? Here are the stories of two men who made the journey. Marcio and Gilson Fumasa both come from this favela, Santa Marta, but they traveled very different paths. Justo da Silva goes by the nickname Fumasa, or Smoke. He grew up, as do 40% of children in the favelas, witnessing or experiencing violence in the home.
There were many fights. My father was an alcoholic. He lost his job because he smoked and drank so much, and then he couldn't find another job. So he would break things at home. Things were bad enough when he was working, but when he lost his job, there were even more fights. There were many fights in my childhood and adolescence. Because of different family problems, I always fought a lot with my girlfriends. There were many beatings. I would beat them up. and I ended up with 3 Maria da Penha violations for violence against women. I would fight because I was jealous. I would fight for anything and for nothing, and then things would degenerate into shouting and hitting.
Fumaça was charged with violating Brazil's Maria da Penha law, enacted in 2006. Before that, domestic violence was against the law, but treated less seriously by police and the courts. Da Penha's ex-husband tried twice to kill her, the first time landing her in a wheelchair, the second by electrocuting her in the shower. A judge threatened Fumaça with a very long jail sentence if Fumaça appeared before him again. Fumaça decided it was time for a change. That, and he was becoming a topic of neighborhood gossip.
I was born and raised here, and everybody knows me, so anything I would do, people would know all about it. It was awful for me, extremely irritating knowing that when people saw my girlfriend with a black eye, they were thinking, oh, Fumaça and her had another fight, and he punched her in the eye, or they're gossiping, did you see that? They're at it again, having yet another fight, or they say, he got kicked out and has got to go to his mother's house again. All that felt bad, it was no fun.
He also heard about Promundo, which carried out community campaigns and offered group education for men seeking change. One of the challenges was recruiting men for the groups. To resolve that, Promundo dangles the prospect of free membership in an amateur soccer league in front of them if the men commit to trying to change. In other words, you stay, you get to play.
They had an elaborate strategy, very sneaky. They had a 4-month soccer tournament at the Rio de Janeiro Santa Marta clinic every Sunday. They would give you a soccer uniform, they would give you everything. The catch was that if you wanted to play soccer on Sunday, you had to attend a bunch of workshops. So if a guy didn't go to workshops during the week, on Sunday, Mr. Soccer couldn't play.
He joined the group sessions reluctantly, but once there, found the first place he ever felt safe talking about his problems.
We always ended up talking about the same thing. Each workshop, no matter what the topic, would lead to discussing violence against women.
The sessions, part group discussion and part talk therapy, helped him realize how he was damaging the people he loved and himself.
It was a question of being authoritarian, of wanting to be better and more important than women. Often I would treat women as if they were my son or daughter or nephew, and I wanted them to be subservient. If they wouldn't do that, then I considered them violent and arrogant. This caused problems and fights.
He went to scores of workshops and training sessions. Now he's very proud of who he has become.
I do everything at home now. I took my children to the mother and child clinic. When my girlfriend was pregnant and wanted to eat pineapple early in the morning, I went out and bought it. When she wanted to eat a brownie, I went out and bought it. I took the children to the doctors. I changed their diapers. I gave them baths. I took them for walks. All of my 4 biological children took their first steps with me. They always counted on me, not on their mothers. They would always ask for me.
Marcio Chagas de Paz was also raised in a home riven with alcoholism and brutality. His father left Marcio and his mother and 5 daughters when Marcio was only 3. But before he left, he damaged his children psychologically in ways that linger long after his death.
Sometimes he would come home already drunk, half drunk, and break things. Everything he could lay his hands on, he would throw everything on the floor. And he often beat up my mother. Once, when she opened the door, he punched her in the face. Her face was swollen for a week. Her eyes were closed. She couldn't leave the house for a week because she couldn't see.
Marcio's father formed another family and moved far away.
So we didn't have a close relationship. We rarely spoke. We only spoke when necessary.
Marcio decided he wanted to be the type of father he never had: close, loving, involved, and concerned. But he didn't know how. He found out about Promundo and started attending meetings.
I realized guys who were big and strong could still get emotional and break down. There were guys in the group who could melt like butter, crying as they would tell their stories about their fathers and how much they missed them. They also talked about problems in their lives now. So I began to realize that the support group in itself was stronger than me, than us. And that was an epiphany. It was a breakthrough, the turning point for me being a different kind of father to my son. You can see people walking around, and they seem to be fine. They all seem happy. But at times, there is a knot inside that eats them up. And when you see that guy, that friend of yours who cried, who melted down, then you shout, "That's great! That's great!" And suddenly that burden was lifted from his chest. Those tears destroyed that big, heavy shell, that facade that we all see from the outside. And today, I see a different person.
Becoming that new person is difficult, and Marcio says not everyone has the capacity to change.
People can change, but it won't happen if this mentality is deep-rooted. It's like trying to uproot a volcano.
Marcio uprooted his own volcano by allowing his father back into his life.
And we talked as if we were good, true friends. And then, after that, he was here with my son. He left, and a week later, he passed away. The good thing about all this was the fact that I was able to forgive my father. And I think that if I hadn't gone to those talks, those workshops, today I would feel guilty if my father died and I hadn't forgiven him. He never gave me a hug. And that day, he hugged me as he said goodbye to me. I lost that ugly feeling toward him. I didn't resent my father anymore.
This forgiveness allowed Marcio to be the kind of father he always craved.
I am very close to my son. I see how sweet he is with me. So I mean to do the right things for him. The things I've always wanted to do, I'm actually doing with him. Obviously, I can't give him everything. But I think the main thing is the love, attention, and affection that I feel for him.
Marcio and his wife planned very carefully for their son. They decided to have just one child so they could give him everything he would need.
Thank God, what Veronica, my wife, and I give to our son, what we provide for our son, we do it. We pay for a good school for him. Thank God we can provide for him.
Marcio and Veronica both work, he as a community organizer and she in 2 part-time jobs, one as a tour guide. In a setting where women are seen as the principal caregivers, having a husband who shares the care work is still relatively rare. In therapy, Marcio learned becoming a good parent and husband included recognizing his wife's civil rights to get an education and earn her own income.
It is not very common for men to stay married with the same wife forever. My father left. He left my mother alone with 5 daughters. I did not want to suffer like my mother did. I did not want to be beaten by a drunken husband.
It takes a lot more than group education and community campaigns to get the men of the favelas, or men anywhere, to buy into gender equality. To scale it up and make it sustainable, Promundo works extensively with the public health sector. With Promundo's input, the Brazilian Health Ministry has set up a protocol for fathers, starting well before the child is born. It's designed to engage fathers in the prenatal process so they bond with the baby while it is still in utero. At the same time, men are encouraged to get checkups for themselves, a rare moment for men. In some critical ways, Brazil is way ahead of the United States and educated European countries in terms of integrating men into gender parity. And it starts right here in this maternity ward.
Very often involving health workers who, whenever a woman comes for a prenatal care exam, ask, why isn't your partner or your husband with you? Can we see you both next time? Let us do the ultrasound exam with both of you present and seeing the baby reflected on the ultrasound, listening to the heart of the baby beating and creating a bond even before the baby is born.
From that first visit, fathers attend maternal health checks with their wives and partners. They become actively involved with the pregnancy as opposed to being excluded. Traditional medical protocol kept the father in the waiting area while the mother gave birth in the delivery room. Fathers learn how to change diapers, feed the baby, sing to it, and build a healthy, non-violent relationship.
Traditionally, health services focus their attention on women and children, with a special emphasis on pregnancy. Men were not part of the equation. Yet as we move towards a more holistic approach, here in Brazil we have the universal healthcare system, which is responsible for the health of all Brazilian citizens. We realize that we have to look at other dimensions, not only men's issues, but also other issues that concern women. It is beautiful to hear the feedback of men who take advantage of these services, of men who are in the delivery room, moved by this experience, since they can indeed experience it in its entirety, this very special moment, a moment full of emotion.
This father held the mother's hand as the baby was delivered by cesarean section. He was right there when the child was born. And after hospital staff cleaned up the baby and gave it oxygen, the newborn was presented to him before the mother.
Domestic violence happens very often as an expression of a very unbalanced power structure within the family and a sense of a group that dominates the other and the other that needs to accept that state of affairs. In fact, I think we are struck by the fact that in so many societies around the world, women accept being beaten by very common reasons. You know, the fact that the food got destroyed because she was paying attention to the baby and the food that was on the oven just burned, or the fact that she went out to fetch water for the house and the child was left unattended, may be accepted as normal reasons to beat the wife. And of course we need to challenge that and to overcome this perception and explain that the role of men and women need to be equal, and a sharing responsibility within the home will help kids being developed with greater confidence and being better supported.
This woman delivered her baby naturally, as she had done with her prior children. This was the first time her husband was by her side.
It is painful, but it's also beautiful. I always wanted him by my side. For being his first time, he did a great job. He calmed me down a lot.
It creates a bond because I've seen what she went through, her struggle, the pain. It's a new closeness because I had never witnessed the birth of a child before. When I saw her giving birth to our son, yes, it's very emotional, a very special moment.
So is men's equal participation in home and child care the final stage of feminism, as mentioned earlier? Gary Barker, who founded Promundo, thinks it is.
We're not going to achieve full equality for women in the workplace and in all the other places where women want to succeed, politics and everywhere else, if somebody's not doing half of the unpaid care work. So even if we have subsidized daycare, we still need somebody to do the care work after hours. And I think, the data we have from around the world finds that when men do more of that, women's income goes up, women are more likely to achieve what they want in the workplace, and it turns out that men are usually happier as well. If we're paying attention and women are being enjoined to lean in, right, we need the equivalent for men, right? So is it men we need you to diaper up or to care up? But there's something we need men to do as the other part of this revolution. And I think there's no way that we achieve equality unless men do the other part that comes with the lean in.
Barker believes, in fact, in many ways, male-dominated and male-designed societies hurt men and boys.
All the lifestyle issues that cause health problems, men are more likely to suffer from them than women are. One of the ways that we try to get men to care for their own bodies is to care for others. And I think our data also shows that when men do the care for others, they also learn to care for themselves.
Then why is change taking so long? And why is men as caregivers still seen as a radical concept in some societies?
This is still a radical idea for the reason that we're so used to associating kind of motherhood with caregiving, right? And manhood is about the things we do in the workplace and we're given credit when we invent things, right? And our business does well. How much credit are we given when we take off time to be with our children? Or we say it's as important that I do that as anything else that I do. So it is redefining what it means to be men. So we've kind of done part of that with feminism to say it's not only motherhood that defines women. And in fact, you can be a woman without being a mother. But I think we need the other part of that revolution, which says, and men can do half the caregiving.
In Sisyphean fashion, Barker keeps rolling his redefinition of manhood up a very unforgiving mountain.
It may look like we're going against the grain and that there's a whole, machinery making violent and aggressive men out there, but it doesn't take a lot to get men to sort of put down that facade and go, you know what? I really was frightened when I was, enjoined to get into that fight. I really would like deeper relationships with others. For as much as the media makes noise and makes lots of, the glorification of certain forms of masculinity, there's also lots of men who are out there already doing this. In fact, you don't have to make it up. We've got stories. You can find men who every day are already practicing this. The question is, are we looking at that, or we're only looking at the images of the harm that men do and glorifying it without looking at, in fact, there's a lot of men who do this caregiving and report these close relationships with others every single day. I often think that our work is not about making new change, but speeding up the change that's already happening.